All right. Hey, everybody. How's it going? Chuck Holton here. We are live coming to you from Daily John, Armenia via Starlink tonight. You can see that beautiful view back behind me. It's incredible here. They call this the Switzerland of Armenia, and you can see why back there. It's beautiful. And so thank you for watching tonight. We got an amazing show. I've got a bunch of stuff to share with you, so we're going to get right into it. There is an escalation happening on both sides in the riots that are taking place in Los Angeles and San Francisco and elsewhere around the country. And so we're going to talk about who's causing it, who's behind it, who's funding it, and what's going to happen next because these people have big plans for the future. And if you think these were spontaneous protests that are mostly peaceful, well, you must have been listening to Maxine Waters because she's one of the politicians out there that's saying there's no violence, there's nothing happening. Listen to this, Maxine Waters. Well, I'll tell you what, before I get to that, let's go to a word from our sponsor, which is TWC, the wellness company, and because this is important and it goes along with some of the news that's coming out recently. So take a listen to this. Hey, as a war correspondent, I've spent years in some of the world's most dangerous, unsanitary, and unstable environments, and I've seen what happens when sickness hits and there's no help coming. That's why what's happening right now in the United States should raise every alarm bell in your head. Just days ago, the FBI arrested two Chinese nationals for allegedly smuggling biological agents into the country. Now, let that sink in. If these are just the ones that got caught, how many others are out there already undetected? Dr. Peter Marks is a guy who used to be the head of vaccines at the FDA, and he recently went on CNN warning about the growing threat of man made biological weapons. Now, he's not talking about some distant hypothetical. He's talking about real engineered bio threats that our system isn't ready for. And if you think the chaos of 2020 can't happen again, think again. Only this time, it might not come from nature. That's why I recommend looking into the Contagion Emergency Kit from the Wellness Company. It includes 5 doctor prescribed medications like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, Tamiflu, and a professional grade nebulizer. These are tools meant for early intervention to give you options when the system breaks down or delays are deadly. It's simple to order. Just fill out a short digital intake form and your kit ships out in 1 or 2 weeks. But here's the catch. It's only available to U.S. residents. So go to twc.health/hotzone and use code HOTZONE to get $32 off and free shipping. You don't need to live in a war zone to face dangerous threats. These days, they're coming to you. So be ready. All right, let's get back to our video. All right, so that's twc.health/hot zone, and you can use the code hot zone, get $32 off and free shipping. And I'm supposed to put it right there on the bottom of the screen, but I can't really do that on a live, but I'll have to stick it in later maybe. Bottom line is, this is something that I've had a lot of people actually asking me about, and that's one of the reasons why I took TWC on as a sponsor. So thank you for those of you who have gone to their website because it's been very successful for them to advertise with us. And again, the people who are asking, there's the link Mrs. Tomlin just put up in the live, and you can go over there and get that contagion kit. It's a good thing to have on hand, really. And I mean, I travel with that kind of stuff all the time. So let's move on. Now, let's talk about these riots. I'm just going to do a quick rundown of what's been happening for those of you that haven't been watching the news too much. Okay, so we're in the last 24 hours, we've seen a pretty serious military escalation as President Trump authorized an additional 2,000 National Guard troops, and that brings the total to 4,000. And he deployed 700 Marines from Camp Pendleton to downtown LA in order to support the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, operations and to protect federal buildings because those become targets whenever people get mad at the federal government. We saw that during the first Trump administration. The left loved to attack federal buildings. Now, these are the same federal buildings that they leave alone during the Biden administration. or the Obama administration. They don't have any problem with those buildings then, but they would just they can't stand them. They've got to destroy those buildings whenever President Trump is the president of the United States. So over the weekend and into Monday, we're going into day 5 now of violent clashes between these rioters and uh, these some poor self-driving cars. They injured a horse by throwing bricks at it. I mean, these are just not good people. They're hurling rocks and bottles and stuff at law enforcement officers, breaking windows. I showed you this video here the other day of this jackwagon throwing bricks at federal law enforcement vehicles as they drive by. They finally figured out who this guy is. They have not caught him yet, but they know his name and they are hunting him, and he is going to get brought to justice along with a bunch of the other guys that were throwing rocks at law enforcement officers during these riots that have been taking place. Okay, so as we've seen that going on, the police have been responding by using tear gas and rubber bullets and flashbangs. There have been more than 100 arrests, some say 150 or more, multiple injuries among protesters as well. And like I said, the police have been injured, a horse got injured. There have been also arrests, over 100 arrests in San Francisco from riots that are happening up there. When I say riots, they're not just attacking the police and federal buildings. They are breaking into businesses and looting them. They are attacking passersby on the street. They are basically just making a nuisance of themselves. And so, what does Gavin Newsom do when the president tries to take steps to put a stop to it? Well, he files a lawsuit against the federal government challenging the legality of deploying military forces without the approval of Gavin Newsom. Go figure. Gavin Newsom actually apparently believes that President Trump is not authorized to do anything unless he gets permission from Gavin Newsom. But that's not the case. Yeah, he's arguing that the federal government is overstepping its bounds under Title 10, and because under Title 32, Gavin Newsom is the one who controls the National Guard in California. But when they get federalized, they go under Title 10. And there's a specific set of circumstances that has to exist for that to be able to happen. President Trump declared that those circumstances exist, and he federalized those troops and sent them into the streets to help the police. Part of the reason he had to do that is because Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, have been, let's say, slow rolling the response of the LAPD to uh, go to the aid of these federal agents who are conducting uh, legal raids in conjunction with uh, the search warrants that they got to go after illegal alien criminals. Now, they didn't just start going after illegal aliens in Los Angeles. Believe it or not, this wasn't like the first day that the federal government has gone after illegal aliens in Los Angeles. They've been doing it for months now. So why now? I'm going to get into that in just a minute. And this is important. You got to listen to this because this is going to affect you in about 4 days. Okay? 4 days from now, all of this is going to affect you. And I'm gonna break it all down for you and explain what's going on. Now, there's been some pretty serious political backlash. The Los Angeles mayor called the conditions peaceful, and she said, "Look, there was no violence until the ICE roundups began." Well, actually, ICE was doing roundups for months, and there wasn't any violence either. So this was not a spontaneous protest like they are trying to say. This was planned, definitely facilitated by a large group of left wing organizations. I'm going to go right down the list for you in just a second, so stay tuned. Hi, Daniel. Good to see you. I love to see supporters online. You can actually support this channel financially for like $5 a month by becoming a supporter on YouTube. But it would be even better if you go over to chuckholton.com and become a supporter over there, because then we actually get more of the money. YouTube takes like 30% of what people give, and we put up a lot of extra stuff over at chuckholton.com, and you get early access to a lot of things and phone calls with me. We do live like Zoom calls about once a month, where you can get on and actually talk to me face to face and ask me your questions. You can do that by becoming a supporter over at chuckholton.com. That's how we stay in business. That's how we keep doing this job. So Gavin Newsom has labeled the deployment of these troops quote unquote deranged and dictatorial and unconstitutional. Well, I guess if Gavin Newsom says so, it must be the truth. Trump has warned that these forces will be authorized to respond with a heavy hand. And what he said was the quote was, if they spit, we will hit. If they spit, we will hit. And he's calling the protesters insurrectionists and is trying to use the unrest to capitalize on that to push through his immigration bill that he has going through Congress. So there have been protests that have erupted in about 30 different cities now, including take a guess. I mean, just take a guess. Put in the chat, where do you think they've been having protests and riots over the last 4 days besides Los Angeles and San Francisco? If you take a guess. Also, uh, thank you very much for hitting like on this video, because that tells the algorithm that they need to show it to more people. So let's see. I see New York in there. You're right. You got it. New York was definitely one of the cities. Uh, yeah, San Francisco. We got San Francisco for sure. Miami. No, I didn't see any in Miami, but Seattle, Portland. I That's according to a Time article I read. The list is San Francisco, Houston, Chicago, Sacramento, and more. And so I'm sure Portland and Seattle are in that list as well. The response in San Francisco has escalated. They've had more than 100 arrests, as I mentioned, and two officers injured during the demonstrations and riots. There have been some smaller actions, solidarity with the protesters in Boston, Salt Lake City, Hartford, Connecticut, of all places, Tampa, and other places. And so this is what I'm getting at, folks. This is spreading. And I told you I told you this would happen. Actually, I told you before the election that this would happen. And this is one of those things where I hate to be right, but I actually wrote a book about it and released it right before the election because I could see this coming. Why? Because I spent 2 years following these protests during the first Trump administration, and I saw how organized they were. I saw that they were being paid for and facilitated by outside forces. And I was like, they're going to do it again. If Trump gets elected, they're going to do it again. And I, I thought it would happen on election night. And I was wrong about that. It didn't happen on election night. It took these organizations a while to get their act together, but they have been planning, plotting, and preparing for now since December all the way to today. And now they are executing their plan. Okay. Uh, there were some people arrested at Trump Tower in New York and 26 Federal Plaza in solidarity with the LA protests. ICE raids were not what triggered the unrest. That was the excuse that they're making for the riots, but that stuff has been happening long before these riots broke out. Uh, so the takeaway is these are not sudden protests. They're not spontaneous protests. They are violent. In some places, they're not violent, but in many places, they are. In response, federal government has deployed National Guard and Marines, and this is going to get more interesting. Now, I wasn't able to find video of the Marines that have already been deployed. There have been 700 of them deployed so far, and we may see a lot more. Likely will. Likely will have to see a lot more. But for some reason, those guys, I think, are just protecting like federal buildings where there aren't any protests or whatever, and they're not. They're just freeing up the federal agents to go to the places where the unrest is. The people who have arrest authority are going to the places where there are people to be arrested, and they're using the Marines to guard places where there aren't people that need to be arrested just yet. Okay, so that's where we are now. Let's talk about what's behind this. We're going to do a deep dive into what is being called the No Kings movement. You can go out, actually look up their website, nokings.org, and they put all this stuff on their website. I mean, it's a lot of it is right there in black and white on their own website. But I did a deep dive into it and found out some very interesting connections of who is supporting this No Kings movement. So, what is the No Kings movement? It's a anti-authoritarian protest coalition. Okay, it's a nationwide protest movement formed to oppose what the organizers say is President Trump's authoritarian strongman tactics and tendencies. The name is, they're rejecting Trump because they say he's acting like a monarch, and so their motto is "No thrones, no crowns, no kings." Well, last time I checked, Trump is not calling himself the king. He still has to submit to the Congress and the Senate and the Supreme Court. And he doesn't wear a crown and he doesn't sit on a throne. So maybe they are calling the new Air Force One a throne, but I mean, I think that's pushing it a little bit. They are now this is where you need to start listening. The No Kings movement is planning a series of protests across the country on June 14th. And we're not talking about minor protests. We're talking about literally hundreds of cities. I thought I would just read the whole list, and I started reading it. I'm like, I would take the entire live just to read you the list of all the cities where they're planning protests on June 14th. Now, obviously, some of those are probably going to fall flat, and some of them are going to be just peaceful protests. But without a doubt, they are setting the stage from Los Angeles and San Francisco and Seattle and Portland and New York and other places right now to whip up sentiment against the federal government and show them what they can do. Now, I want to show you a video from Maxine Waters, that absolute clown show of a congressperson. Maxine Waters gave a speech today or yesterday, I guess, in which she was talking about uh, that there's no violence happening. And what I did is I just layered on top of it. Thank you, Cowpoke Ranch. That's very kind to you. I appreciate the $5. That's nice. She's saying that there is no violence, and I'm layering on top of it some of the video of the riots. And so you make your own decision. Take a look.
Protests, and even those who were out of step with what we are advocating, peaceful protest, did not create any violence. Nobody was shot, nobody was killed. Get it in your head. And so when martial law is called, what are you going to say? I missed the point. Don't miss the point, you all. Don't think that somehow, because they called out the National Guard, there was violence. There was no violence. I was on the street. I know. And I went from downtown detention back out into the community, talking to people what happened in Paramount, what happened in Compton, what happened in Inglewood. So, first of all, get it straight. And don't just rely on what you're being told or the few incidents that you saw.
All right. So here's Maxine Waters. There's no violence. I was there. Believe me, there's no violence. And you see them burning cars. There's video of them smashing about a half a dozen police cars so far, burning other just random passersby cars. I saw them pouring gasoline all over somebody's Jeep and lighting it on fire. Of course, we've got the video of this guy that they're looking for throwing rocks. There's no violence, Vaccine Water says. Trust me, I was there. There's no violence. Oh yeah, maybe Maxine Waters needs to tune in to this podcast and see some of the violence that's happening out there. Okay, so Yeah, maybe she ought to take a Waymo. That's great. Maybe Maxine Waters, if she took a Waymo, she might find out how much violence there is. Okay, but that is what the politicians are doing right now. They're absolutely gaslighting people and saying that this is a big overreaction. The government is just overreacting to people peacefully trying to kill them. Why would these law enforcement officers be upset? Because there's just a crowd of people that's out there trying to kill them. That's all, peacefully. So, there's that. Now, nokings.org is initiate or they're supported by an organization called Indivisible. Indivisible is a national organization. They try to call it a grassroots organization, but none of these organizations are actually grassroots. It's an organization that was founded by progressive activists, including a woman named Leah Greenberg. And she just says that President Trump has royal pretensions and, like his demand for this airplane. And so they're providing strategic leadership for the anti Trump movement. There's another group called the 5051 Grassroots Network. Now, 5051 stands for the concept of 50 protests in 50 states on one day. So they want to have a protest in every state of the union on one day. The first protest that 5051 supported was February 5th of this year, and that was they called a rapid response to what they said were Trump's anti-democratic illegal actions. And despite having no actual reported income, they managed to pull off 80 plus peaceful rallies. They say peaceful in all 50 states in a matter of days. They've done subsequent protests February 17th, March 4th, April 5th, April 19th, May 1st, and all of that is building momentum to June 14th. And we're going to let's talk about what they have planned for June 14th. But first, let's talk about who their allies are and who's supporting these people. Now, this movement is not grassroots. It has attracted a lot of prominent figures from the left. So people like Randy Weingarten, who's the president of the American Federation of Teachers. So this is American Federation of Teachers. The leader is coming out in support of No King's Day on June 14th. Uh, that signals support from major labor unions across the country. So we've got there are a lot of people across the country that are forced to belong to labor unions or else they can't keep their job. And some of their union dues are likely going to facilitate these protests and riots across the country. And many of them, you can imagine, don't agree with what these organizations are doing, but their money is going to support these organizations without a doubt. Now, there are more than 150 progressive organizations that are supporting the No Kings Coalition. And we're talking about everybody from labor unions, civil rights and social justice groups like the ACLU is supporting them. Uh, the Color of Change Human Rights Campaign, which is an LGBTQ plus minus $ ampersand hashtag organization. Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, which is one of Mikey Weinstein's things. This guy who absolutely hates God with a burning passion of 1,000 suns, and does not believe that you have a right to practice your religion anywhere outside of your church. And so there's another one that's a Jewish organization called Bend the Arc. Uh, Black Voters Matter, Community Change Action, Common Cause, Greenpeace, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. That's Mikey Weinstein's as well. And so you're talking about a huge swath of civil society. And this is what I was talking about yesterday. these organizations all work together, even if they're focused on gun rights or LGBTQ plus minus the ampersand stuff, or pro-abortion, or pro-Hamas, or pro-Palestinian, whatever, environmental justice. All of these organizations work together for all of their left-wing causes, and they are all involved in planning, helping to facilitate the planning for these protests slash riots that are slated to happen in hundreds of cities across the United States on June 14th. Okay. So, I mean, what does a gun violence prevention group have to do with protesting ICE? It doesn't, but they all come together and back each other. And that's why you see these massive protests during the Trump administration for all these different causes, because it's all the same people going to the protests. Okay. Notably, uh, there are, groups like Media Matters and other networks that are helping to support NoKings.org. Groups like Common Defense, Accountable.us, Declaration for American Democracy, Demcast USA, even the College Democrats of America, the official national college wing of the Democratic Party, is listed as a partner on NoKings.org. And that just underscores that the Democratic establishment is aligning with this cause. What you're seeing, all of this violence that you're seeing in Los Angeles and San Francisco and elsewhere, the Democratic Party is aligning themselves behind this cause, and they've been doing this for some time. MoveOn.org, Activate America, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we go on and on. Again, 150 different groups. The Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm sorry, and Liberation. Socialism and Liberation. So, socialist groups, communist groups, not just abolish ICE groups. Okay. Now, where do they get their money? From all of those organizations. So, it's not a grassroots organization. It is a clearinghouse for this money that's being given from all these different organizations. But there's more than that. There is an organization uh, that is more invisible, that is giving money to these all of these organizations, especially this No Kings movement. And it's called the Democracy Alliance. DA is a network of wealthy donors who is supporting progressive and democratic causes across the United States. It was founded in 2005 by a group of people that included, you guessed it, George Soros and other billionaires. So Tom Steyer, billionaire environmentalist, Pat Stryker, a philanthropist and heiress to the Stryker medical fortune, Nick Hanauer, a venture capitalist and Amazon investor, Rob McKay, heir to the Taco Bell fortune, Steven Spielberg is part of this, and he's been a participant that's paid money for these DA events. Susan Sandler, uh, Chris Hughes, the co-founder of Facebook, is involved in this, and more and more and more. I mean, it goes on and on. Organizations that get funded by these people, on top of NoKings.org, a lot of the organizations that are giving money to NoKings.org. So Center for American Progress, Media Matters for America, MoveOn.org, America Votes, Emily's List. If you've ever used Emily's List, you are giving money to an organization that supports these riots. Okay. And there's a whole lot more. I mean, I could just keep on going. It just is ridiculous how many left wing organizations are lining up to give money to these causes and facilitate these uh, protests and riots across the country. Okay, folks, we got almost 4,000 people watching the live right now and 1,200 likes. So do me a favor and go hit that like button. I know you need to be reminded. I need to be reminded. I always forget. It does help a lot. It doesn't cost you anything. We're not going to spam you. Just go hit that little thumbs up and while I'm talking, and you can keep listening, but it really does help. And I, of course, I really appreciate the people who are chatting here in the chat because, and I'm watching it go by here. I can't read it all; it's going by real fast. But I'm catching a few of these comments you're making, and I appreciate all that because that tells YouTube this is a popular podcast and more people need to be shown the podcast, and it works. Thank you, Alta. Questions. What is to stop someone from using a gun or some kind of explosive in this chaos while the officers are told to use non-lethal force? It's a good question, Alta. And the answer is they are using guns. As a matter of fact, there was sheriff, a county sheriff that went on Fox News and said, my officers are being shot at. My deputies are being shot at by these crowds, and we cannot shoot back with lethal force. And it is a huge problem because now, the police, they're wearing their body armor and all that, but still, y- they could easily be killed. And if there's a guy in the crowd that's shooting at the officers, their rules of engagement will not allow them to shoot back if the crowd is around and they're going to kill a bunch of innocent people. This is what I was talking about yesterday, where the crowd wants this mob wants to give the Trump administration a dilemma with no good answers. There's no good solutions to this because if they don't do anything, they lose and the rioters win. But if they do something, they lose and the rioters win. And so it's just a matter of what is the least bad option for the Trump administration. So good question there, Alta. Thank you for asking that. And if you've got questions, put them in all caps. Of course, it does help if you donate a little bit because then it comes up a different color, makes it easier to see. Um, did the city of LA refuse to protect federal property? Yes, they have refused to protect federal property, and they did that also in Portland and Seattle. So the Trump administration, done for the last time, had to send U.S. Marshals and the FBI hostage rescue team and people who had actual important jobs to do, like safeguarding airplanes that you and I fly on and rescuing hostages and things like that. They had to put all that aside and they had to go protect concrete buildings so that they didn't get burned down. And they would. It's amazing that they survived. I'll be interested to see if they end up surviving the next 3 years. That'll be the real question. Okay, so now Soros and the Open Society Foundation uh, is often speculated to be behind these movements, but in this case, there's a direct line. Okay, for example, Soros's network allocated $150 million in 2020 alone toward racial justice and immigrant rights groups. Uh, George Soros is a huge advocate of illegal immigration. And so I actually went into the Open Society Foundation and looked at the annual report. And in the annual report, they list the people they give grants to, and there are dozens of uh, pro-immigrant organizations and immigrant advocacy groups in that report that the Open Society Foundation gives money to. Why we continue to allow this, I don't know. Now, there are other major immigrant advocacy nonprofits, like there's one called Chirla, uh, and Chirla actually received like $34 million from the U.S. government under Joe Biden. And that just got cut off by Pamela Bondi. But these guys have definitely received a lot of grants from the U.S. government that they are now using to facilitate and plan and organize these riots. Now, what do I mean by organize? What do I mean by facilitate? So they're not just, I mean, they are going out on social media and posting these things. Hey, show up here. We're going to have a protest. Here's what we're going to do. Here's when we're going to do it. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Thank you, Robin. Very kind to you. Uh, was there a question in there? Tuck and team always appreciate it. Oh, no, no question. Thank you very much. Um, thank you, Trisha. Very nice. Uh, so, no, when I say facilitating these riots, what I mean is something like this. Let's see where that is. I was passing cars. Now this is the Waymo. Here we go. These are pallets of bricks. Now, why are there wrapped pallets of bricks sitting in a parking lot right behind a building? And oh gosh, look, there's a line of policemen that is preparing to disperse a riot. And these bricks just happen to be there. And you should say, well, maybe they're planning to build something. Well, that's not enough bricks to build something with. Okay. So why are they there? And look right there. Those bricks are being broken up into smaller pieces by throwing them on the ground so that they can be thrown more easily at the police. Somebody is paying for those bricks. That right there is probably 2,000, I don't know, maybe $1,000 worth of bricks. It depends on what country you're in, but that in the United States, I'd say, okay, that's $1,000 worth of bricks. Where did the $1,000 come from? Well, it came from organizations like Churla, right? And uh, Unidos US, which used to be called La Raza. And these guys have all received grants from the Open Society Foundation, George Soros, etc. Hey, John, good to see you. Thank you for the gift memberships. That's very kind of you. I appreciate that a lot. Um, so, Open Society Foundation has been sort of shifting their tactics because they were getting a lot of press in the United States that was negative. And so rather than funding so much of what's happening inside the US, they started funding the caravans and things like that, paying for these migrants to make their way illegally up into the United States. And so that was a little less visible. But I've been reporting on it, and a lot of other of my friends in the business have been as well. Okay. Now, they've also, these organizations have been crowdfunding by putting it out on social media saying, hey, we need money for shields, we need money for helmets, we need money for gas masks, and we need money for, uh, goggles and food and things like that. And they do have a bunch of small donors who give small dollar donations, and that really adds up through the fundraising raising platform called Act Blue. Now, if you recall, the attempted assassin of President Trump back during the in Butler, Pennsylvania, was a donor to Act Blue, and Act Blue gathers up small donations from people like that and then gives them to Democratic causes. And in this case, Churla, which is an LA immigrant rights group, raises money through Act Blue, as do Indivisible. And Indivisible is funding the NoKings.org movement, which is planning these riots and protests across the country on June 14th. Now, they're calling it the nationwide No Kings Day of Defiance. It's a mass mobilization to counter Trump's parade because that's the day, Saturday, June 14th, is the day that President Trump has commanded that the U.S. military throw a parade uh, in for Flag Day in Washington, D.C. Now, a lot of people see that and say, well, it's a patriotic display. We haven't had one of those in a long time. Might be kind of nice to have a military parade. Lots of countries do that. It's not weird around the world for a country to put their military on display to show the people that pay for that military what they're getting for their money. But of course, the Democrats are saying that this is all just a big ego trip because it happens to be Trump's birthday as well. And I'm sure there's some ego involved, but okay, who cares? It is a patriotic parade. It marks the Army's 250th anniversary. It's in Washington, D.C., and it's a show of strength for our adversaries. That's one of the reasons why For example, Russia does a May Day parade every year in Moscow. It's a show of strength. It says, this is here, look at all the stuff we've got. You don't want to mess with us. So it might be a good idea geopolitically for the United States to put on a show of strength of our military as well, because our military's been pretty quiet lately, other than the Operation Rough Rider that took place in Yemen, over Yemen. It is, kind of, they don't want a lot of publicity for the military. Well, it's time to change that. And so they're having this parade, but the No King's Day is slated to be a response to that parade and try to deliberately draw attention away from the parade. I think in some ways it might actually get the parade even more attention, but in others, I mean, especially if there's violence that breaks out all across the country, then, well, that's kind of important. And it's going to dilute the media's coverage of the parade that day if they have that. Okay, so instead of rallying in Washington D.C., because that's what I thought they would just have, I figured they'd have a bunch of counter protesters at the parade, trying to break up the parade, to try to do a Tiananmen Square thing and go stand in front of the tanks and not let the tanks pass. Don't be surprised if that happens. I mean, I think it's highly likely that this parade in Washington, D.C. gets disrupted by protesters. Okay, now they're going to be high security there for sure. But obviously, the tanks are not going to run over anybody that runs out into the street. And so that could very well cause an issue. No question about that. Now, there's the flagship march for the No King's Day is staging in Philadelphia, which they're saying is symbolic because it's America's cradle of democracy, et cetera, et cetera. And simultaneous protests are planned in over 1,800 locations on that day, from big cities to small towns. Folks, this is something you're going to want to prepare for. All right. Now, I wrote a book about this, as I mentioned before. It's called Death of Civilization. You can get it on Amazon, or you can go to chuckholton.com. And if you're a supporter, you can download this book for free. And so I will repost that book shortly after this live over at chuckholton.com. So go over to chuckholton.com, become a paying supporter, and you can download a copy of my book for free. All right. And you'll you'll be able to get a PDF of it and read it at your leisure. But this book is based on a military manual that helps to teach military units how to keep themselves safe in a non-permissive environment. A non-permissive environment is just a place that's very unfriendly to them. Okay? That doesn't like them being there. Well, guess what? These protesters don't like you being here either. And they want you to basically toe the line, support them, or leave. Right? If you don't support them, you're a Nazi. That's what they say. So the nokings.org website has provided a interactive map for supporters so that they can find an event near them. And it just shows, I mean, you go look at that, and there's just everywhere. Now, again, they've mapped out 1,800 locations in all 50 states, but that doesn't mean there's going to be 1,800 protests. And it doesn't mean that the protests are going to be as massive and dangerous and destructive as the ones in Los Angeles. But some of them will be. Some of them will be, and it might be where you live. Just remember what happened during the Black Lives Matter summer after George Floyd died. Those protests spread all across the United States and even across the planet. They had George Floyd protests in like 100 countries. I mean, everywhere. And, all for a whacked out druggie. That's crazy. And now, Selsworth asks, can you talk about the concept of concentration of forces in the context of the protests? Well, okay. I'm going to talk about it on both sides of the protests. Okay, so if we talk first of all about concentration of forces, the concept that they put out on social media that we're going to have a protest at this street corner at this time, go. And a whole bunch of people run down there and, you know, make a protest. And that when they get enough people, sort of takes on a life all its own. It kind of becomes its own gravitational pull that pulls in other people from the surrounding area. And that is something that can appear very suddenly and disappear very suddenly because it's all being orchestrated on social media. Now, as I said yesterday, the police cannot respond that fast. The police have to get their SWAT team in, call them in from home and get their gear on and get their vehicles ready and get out. So it takes them an hour or two to marshal their forces. And so they're behind the eight ball with these protesters because the protesters are much more nimble than they are. Okay. Now, when it comes to concept of concentration of forces for the police, we saw this happen in Los Angeles today or last night. What they did was they would push the protesters from one place to another using tear gas and pepper balls and other methods and get them to move. And they start herding them like they're a bunch of sheep. And what they do is they concentrate their forces in one area and then they push those protesters into those forces and pedal them in. They box them in on a street where they can't get away. And then they just arrest everybody. And that's what they did last night. So, I guess that's what you're talking about. Mama Marissa put up a question. Do you think the cartel is funding this too? I haven't found any uh, evidence of the cartels funding it, but we have found evidence of other countries funding this. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, so stay tuned for that. I'll get around to it in just a second, Mama Marissa. Now, uh, these local events that are being planned are being independently organized by volunteers in each area, and they're trying to unify around a common message with rejecting President Trump and trying to say that this is a patriotic duty. We're taking back our flag. Well, actually, they had a real PR snafu at the beginning of these riots because they were waving the flags of Mexico, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Palestine. And it was perfect recruiting or perfect ammunition for President Trump immigration bill and for the 2026 elections for the Republicans. I mean, all the Republicans need to do is take video of burning Waymo cars with a guy standing on top waving a Mexican flag in Los Angeles and say, "You want more of this? If you don't, vote for the Republicans." And that is perfect, right? So that wasn't too smart. And so but last night they were a little smarter. And what you see in the videos that came out is that they were waving American flags now. And now they're trying to say, "Oh, this is our flag and we're taking back the American flag." Well, yeah, good luck with that. Um, they're saying that they are billing this as peaceful, lawful protests. Again, good luck with that because when the mob mentality takes over, especially when you have politicians that these people look up to, yeah, excuse me, like Maxine Waters and Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass and all these, the squad members and other Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries, what a clown that guy is. Holy cow. That guy is proof that American democracy is bit flawed, let's just say, because if a guy as truly ignorant as Hakeem Jeffries can get elected and keep getting elected, well, we deserve what we get. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, the ACLU has actually been putting on training for the people who are going to be attending these protests, and the training is not about how to uh, de-escalate or how to uh, protest peacefully or anything like that. It's like, no, here's what your rights are when you get arrested. Here's what you should say, who you should call, what you should not say. Here's how far you can push the police without getting arrested. This is how far you can tiptoe up to the line of committing a felony before they can actually charge you with something. So here's how you can get yourself off if you happen to get picked up in an arrest in one of these riots. Okay. And should the ACLU be allowed to train people to break the law? I mean, that's essentially what they're doing. Do you think they should be allowed to do that? Is that part of free speech? Is it free speech to train people to break the law? Last I checked, if you're calling for uh, illegal behavior, it's like shouting fire in a crowded movie theater. That doesn't apply. Free speech does not apply to that. Now, what's going to happen June 14th? Each protest is going to be a little different. Some are going to be more patriotic than others. Some cities are going to hold We the People fairs or voter registration drives alongside their rallies, but other cities, there are going to be faith leaders and union organizers that are going to be coming together and advocating for their communities. But after what we've seen in Los Angeles and San Francisco and New York and 30 other cities across the country over the last 4 days, you can see where they are going with this. Okay. Now, let me turn and talk about my book for a second. Just indulge me if you haven't read the book. Death of Civilization, the first part of the book just talks about this problem, just helps you understand better why it's coming, what is coming, and why. But the majority of the book, or at least the second half of the book, is based on that military manual that I found in Afghanistan many years ago. And I've only ever seen it that one time. And so it's not a common military manual. I think it was actually a doctoral dissertation from somebody at West Point or something like that. I don't know. But it talked about human train mapping. And so I'm just going to, what I did is I kind of rewrote that military manual for civilians, for your average person that's watching all this stuff take place and go, like, oh my gosh, what do I do if this comes to my neighborhood? If they're rampaging through my neighborhood and burning cars and breaking windows and setting things on fire? What do I do? Okay. And listen, I'm telling you that these 150 organizations that are all being funded by the Democratic Alliance are planning for as much chaos as possible for the next 3 years because that's their playbook. Their playbook is to make you so miserable, make it so that you can't walk down the street safely, you can't drive your kids to school because some jackwagon is going to be standing in the middle of the road with a protest sign. That's their plan. Just make you so miserable that you won't want to vote for more Donald Trump or more of his policies. That you'll just capitulate and say that I'm just exhausted. It's enough. I'm tired of all these riots and protests everywhere. So I'll just vote for the Democrats. And you know what? It worked. It worked for them the first time. And so they're going back to that playbook again. And the answer to that, and as I explain in the book, is for you to prepare right now, not by just going out and buying 2 years worth of, dried foods. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the fact that we are all isolated and unable to actually do much about this. Thank you, William. I'll get to that question here in a second. Um, we're unable to really have much of an effect in stopping this lawlessness because we're very separated from each other. We're not a true community in the United States anymore. In very few places in America can you still find what I would consider to be true community. True community is where you know the people that you live next door to. You know the guy across the street. You don't just know him. You go to barbecues at his house. He comes to barbecues at your house. Your kids play with his kids. Okay. And you spend time together. Your neighborhood becomes a bastion of safety when you know the people around you. And you know, I can trust that guy. That guy knows how to do X, Y, and Z. And if I need this, I know where I can go to get help doing that. And that's where it's a neighborhood where people help each other. That's what we want. We need to reestablish these strong communities in America, reestablish this sense of civic pride and the sense that I want to do something about all of this mayhem in my community. And so I'm going to put massive amounts of pressure on my elected leaders to get them to put a stop to it, to get them to actually do what's necessary to stop it and stop encouraging this kind of behavior. Look, I've seen it work before. There's one subculture of people who is very politically active and very, man, I mean, they will burn up the phone lines if they get hot on a particular issue, and that's homeschoolers. Homeschoolers is a tight-knit subculture of people that exists across the country. There's millions of us now, and when there's some legislation that's proposed that's going to make it harder to homeschool, or they're shutting down a homeschool out in California, something like that, man, I have seen homeschoolers pull together and just light up the phone lines to their elected leaders and actually get things changed. We need more people to do things like that. And to do that, we've got to be able to expand our own reach. We've got to expand the territory of knowledge that we have in our communities by getting to know our neighbors and actually being friendly to them. Instead of being so caught up and just looking at Instagram all day or Facebook or something like that, we need to actually put that phone down, go outside, and go next door and see if we can help. Hey, you're working on your car. Can I help you? Hey, you're digging a hole. Can I help you? Hey, whatever. We need a whole lot more of that. And that is, I think, the secret to establishing a resilient community, no matter where you live, that will make you and your family safer in the case of localized or generalized unrest that comes to your town. Okay. Now, William asked a question here. Thank you for that, William. Chuck, what are the chances that the Islamofascist group, uh, the Smurfs, will strike during all this unrest? Well, right. And then he says, Rangers lead the way. So this must be a Ranger buddy. Oh, Shep. Hey, Shep. Um, dude, it so totally could happen. And now you're familiar with the OODA loop. The OODA loop is observe, orient, decide, and act. And so these terrorist organizations, any criminal organization, it goes through a continuous loop here of looking to see where there's an opportunity to strike, orienting themselves on that victim, and then deciding to act, and then going ahead. That deciding means they have to prepare to do it, figure out what they need to act, whether whatever that is, and then acting. Well, the only thing I would say about whether or not Islamofascist groups might take advantage of the unrest to strike is that if it goes on long enough, they will have time to plan something like that. If they put a stop to it quickly, then most likely they won't. That's the best I can come up with for you there. Um, Cindy says duct tape fixes everything. Okay, well, it's not going to fix these protests. Um, Yeah, so I'm friendly with two of my neighbors, but I don't trust them. Well, you need to find the people in your neighborhood who you can trust and get to know them and become somebody that your neighbors can trust as well. My question to you would be not whether you trust your neighbors, it would be whether or not your neighbors trust you. And if they don't, why not? Have you not given them a reason to trust you? Have you not given them cause to trust you? You should be. You should be looking for ways to do that. And the way you do that is you join with them when they're doing something difficult. If the car broke down or their, you know, mower broke or whatever, you be a good neighbor. And you've got to be the one to initiate that. Don't expect your neighbors to initiate those things. Okay. Pam says riots, not protests. Yeah, I've been saying that. I've been saying riots. I haven't been saying protests so much. But all right, we're coming down to the end here today. Again, thousands of people watching. We've had more than 20,000 people on since we started this live. And folks, please hit that like button. It really makes a difference. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure that you go subscribe to the Hot Zone. Like I said, you can get a free download PDF of my book, A Death of Civilization, by going to chuckholton.com and becoming a supporter over there. And again, I will repost the link to that here very shortly. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for watching. Again, make sure you visit our sponsors, the Wellness Company, those contagion kits, which have, like I said, ivermectin, um, uh, hydroxychloroquine, Tamiflu, nebulizer, and other things. It's a good thing to have on hand. You don't want to wait until, and it could save you a lot of money because it could save you a trip to the emergency room or the uh, healthcare. What do you call those medical care places? Urgent care facility. If you have that stuff on hand. So it's just pre-positioning that stuff. And you might remember when there were times when some of those different drugs were not available. They were very, very hard to get. So it might be a good thing to stockpile. And I think their contagion kit is one of the most complete kits out there and definitely worth looking into. So go to twc.health/hot zone and put in the code hot zone. You get, like I said, $32 off and free shipping. All right. God bless you.